Welcome to another free pattern video. Today I'm going to teach you how to knit these really fun textured mittens. They're made using a really simple stitch that alternates knits and purls, and it gives you this really nice broken rib texture. This pattern is sized for women, but I'll have a video on men's mittens coming out soon. These are really simple and easy to make. I will walk you through every step and teach you all of the techniques that you'll need to know, how to increase and decrease, how to put stitches on hold, how to pick up stitches, and how to weave in your ends and close up any holes. This is a very easy and simple pattern. If this is the first pattern you've ever knit, it might be a little bit too challenging for you, but I encourage you to watch the video and see for yourself. But I walk you through every technique and every step that is different from just basic knitting. And these mittens are knit the same for left and right hands, so you only have to follow the instructions for one hand and then you just flip it over if you want to use it for the other hand. You'll need 110 yards, 101 meters of worsted weight yarn. Sometimes worsted is called medium number 4 in like a big box stores like Joann's. In the UK, I believe it's called Aran, and in Australia, I believe it's called 10 ply. So the yardage is per pair of mittens, and it may vary slightly because you knit your mittens to your desired length, and that may vary slightly from the sample. To match gauge, I used a set of US 8, and you'll want them to be at least 32 inches in cord length because we're going to be working in magic loop. And for the gauge, you're going to work seated rib, which I'll show you in a minute. And I worked it in the round, and I got 18 stitches, 26 rows per 4 inches, 10 centimeters. Now the circumference of the hand of this mitten is going to be 8 inches, and the cuff will be the same. So if you want the cuff to fit a little bit more snug, you will want to use a size needle a couple sizes smaller for the rib, and then switch to your gauge size needles for the hand. The height is customizable. I'll give you some sample heights when we get to that part in the pattern based off of just average heights. The sample is 7.5 inches tall. Here's an abbreviations list if you are newer to knitting, and there will be timestamps in the video description if you want to skip ahead. To begin, you're going to cast on 37 stitches. It doesn't matter how you're going to do it. I prefer the long tail cast on method, but you can use whichever method you prefer. If you want a beginner cast on, you can find my tutorial for that here. Here are my tails. Count 18 stitches up from your tails. I've counted 18 stitches up. You can see the cord after it. I'm going to kind of pull these 2 stitches away, and it shows the cord. So you can bend your cord a little bit and then just pull on it. So I like to pinch my sides together so that they don't get twisted, and then just push the needles so that the stitches slide onto them without twisting, and you can readjust as needed. You want to have 18 stitches on this needle attached to your yarn and 19 on the other. If you don't, you can just slide them down to the bend and rearrange them. So what we're going to do is we're going to push our stitches kind of towards the tip of our needles, and we're going to take one stitch from our back needle and slip it to this front needle here. So what I do is I just basically use my hands. I pick this one up and I just slip it on. Okay, I didn't twist it or anything. And next what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this second stitch here over this first, the one that I just slipped, and off. So I just kind of pick it up with my fingers and I pull it over and off. And now I can pull on both tails to kind of tighten that gap a little bit if there's any loose stitches. You have just joined in the round, so you're ready to work in magic loop method. So now I need to turn my work. So I just kind of flip it, and I'm going to bring my working yarn in between my needles, and I'm ready to work in the round. We are about to begin our first row, so you might want to place a removable stitch marker in the stitches in your first needle, just so that you know that this is needle A. Your stitches should be distributed as 18 evenly on both needles. We're now going to work on our cuff, so we're going to work in ribbing. Rounds 1 through 7, you're just going to work a knit 1, purl 1, repeat, and these instructions are the same for both needles. So you're just working in a 1 by 1 rib all the way around. So if you've never knit in magic loop before, you start to just pull on the needle in the back until you have a little bit of a loop. My cable's not super long. I would have a much longer loop here if I was using longer cables, but now I just knit normally. So I knit the first stitch, purl the second, and repeat that. So go into the front loop, of the first stitch, crisscross your needles, yarn over, pull through, slide off. Bring your yarn in between your needles to the front, go into the next stitch into the front loop of it from right to left, yarn over, pull through, slide off. Bring your yarn in between your needles to the back, and you just repeat that. So it might feel a little bit clunky in the beginning if you've never done magic loop before, but you'll get more comfortable with it as we go along. Okay, so now I've gotten to my last stitch, so I just purl it, slide it off, and now I need to flip my work. So remember, our rows are kind of split into two parts. The stitches on needle 1 or needle A, and then the stitches on needle B. So we need to knit off of both needles in order to have one row done. So we can let go of our left needle, and you want to just turn your work. And now we can pull on the cord attached to the needle that's loose. And I like to just kind of push the stitches on, and the yarn should be kind of in the middle of your work. So now the back needle, we can pull on it until we have enough space back here and enough cord to work with that we are comfortably knitting. So now we're just going to do the same exact thing. We're going to go into the front loop, yarn over, pull through, slide off. So then I bring my yarn in between my needles to the front, go into the next stitch, front loop of it from right to left, and before I yarn over, because there's a bit of a gap in between our needles, when I'm working the second stitch after I have my needle inserted, I like to just kind of pull on the working yarn a little bit to close up any gap in between our needles. Okay, so now yarn over, pull through, slide off, yarn in between your needles to the back, and you just repeat a knit 1, purl 1 all the way across. So now I'm done. So I just kind of push those stitches onto my needle so they don't fall off, and now we get to turn our work again. So we just take it and we flip it. You can either push on this cord here or pull on it. To be safe, you want to kind of push it on so that you don't accidentally pull the wrong cord. Push your stitches back onto your needle, and that was one row. Now you just need to work 6 more for a total of 7 rows of knit 1, purl 1 rib. So remember to pull on the back needle because that's going to be our right needle when we're knitting. And every time I'm starting the beginning of my needle, I work the first stitch normally. And then when it comes to the second stitch, I put my needle into it as it should be. And I kind of tug on the working yarn, not super tight, just a little bit, and then continue working across my row. And I do that because you can kind of see that the gap in between our halves of our rows, there's a little bit of a gap. We want to make sure that's not super loose. So you don't want to do it too tightly that you can't slide your stitches or anything, but just enough that there's not laddering or a gap. So go ahead and work another 6 rows of ribbing for a total of 7, and I'll meet you back here for row 8. Now this is the cuff of our mitten. So it's not super long. If you prefer a longer cuff, just go ahead and knit more ribbing. Like if you want to knit another inch or 2, go ahead and do that. We're going to do a couple more rows of our cuff and then move on to the thumb gusset part. So this creates a ridge of purl bumps here that kind of separates the ribbing from the stitch pattern. So just go ahead and knit around for row 8, purl around for row 9, and again knit around for round 10. So we're now going to work a couple of rows in our stitch pattern just to familiarize yourself with it, and then work in the thumb gusset. At the start of a row, the first needle is needle A and the second needle is needle B. So these stitches are all needle A stitches and these stitches are all needle B stitches. So from here on out, rows will be divided into, for example, row 1A, row 1B, and then you just repeat stitch pattern rows 1 and 2 one additional time. So in total, you'll have done 4 rows. So I'll walk you through the first repeat. So for row 1A, we go into the front loop of the first stitch, crisscross our needles, yarn over, pull through, slide off. And you do that twice for a total of 3 knit stitches. Then bring your yarn in between your needles to the front and purl 1, into the front loop from right to left, yarn over, pull through, slide off. Yarn in between your needles to the back, and you just repeat those 4 stitches 4 times. And you should have 2 stitches at the end. And when you get down to those last 2 stitches, you just knit them as normal. Now we can go ahead and turn our work. So go under the front loop of the first stitch, crisscross your needles, yarn over, pull through, slide off. Bring your yarn in between your needles to the front, go into the next stitch from right to left. Tighten that yarn to remove any gap in between your needles. Yarn over, pull through, slide off. Bring your yarn in between your needles to the back, and we're going to work the repeat of a knit 3, purl 1. So knit the next 3 stitches. Bring your yarn in between your needles to the front and purl 1. And that's it. You just repeat the knit 3, purl 1 all the way across the row. And then for row 2A, remember the side with our stitch marker is our A side. Knit the first stitch normally. Bring your yarn in between your needles to the front, into the front loop from right to left, and purl that stitch. Bring your yarn in between your needles to the back, and you work a repeat of a knit 3, purl 1 all the way across. And for 2B, so you know the drill, knit the first 3 stitches, pull tight when you are in the second stitch, and you just do that a total of 4 times until you have only 2 stitches left, and then you just knit the last 2 stitches. Turn your work. Go ahead and repeat rows 1 and 2 again for a total of 4 stitch pattern rows. After that, I'll meet you back here for the thumb gusset. We're going to do this section right here. So you kind of separate these stitches here because they will become your thumb. So you're going to place a marker here and work an increase on this side of the marker so that you can kind of create this shape. I have written it on screen right now if you want to work ahead. So now I'm going to walk you through a few more rows to get you started, and then I'm going to only demonstrate the increase rows just to save on time. So I have a couple stitch markers on hand. So remember to pull out the second needle. So knit 3, purl 1, and do that 3 times. So you should have 12 stitches on your right needle right now and 6 on your left. So go ahead and place a marker onto your right needle. So knit the next 3 stitches. Bring your yarn in between your needles to the front and purl the next one. Yarn to the back and knit 2. So right now it looks like this. We have these stitches, which are here, and then our thumb stitches, which go up to create the thumb, are sectioned off by our marker. So now if we turn our work, we're going to section off some stitches here on the right side of this for our thumb as well. So for row 1B, so knit the first stitch, bring your yarn in between your needles to the front, purl the next stitch, yarn in between your needles to the back and knit 3, yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back. So you should now have 6 stitches on your right needle. Place a stitch marker on your right needle, and now work a knit 3, purl 1 for the rest of your row. So this right here looks like this. These are our thumb stitches here. They're sectioned off right here. This is the rest of our mitten. This is the rest of our mitten. So go ahead and turn your work. For row 2A, so this is our first increase row. So we're essentially working until we get to the marker. We work an increase on this side of the marker, slip it, and then work our thumb stitches. Our increases will always be on the bigger side of our marker. Our thumb stitch count here will not change throughout the gusset. So knit the first stitch, yarn in between your needles to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 3, do that again, yarn in between your needles to the front, purl 1, yarn in between your needles to the back, knit 2. Now don't slip your marker just yet. We're going to work a make 1. So you can kind of see where my finger is right here, that there's a horizontal bar between your left needle and your right needle. We're going to place that on our left needle. The most fluid motion is to take your left needle, go behind it, and place it on your needle. So you want it to be orientated like this. And now you're going to knit it. So go into this front loop like this, yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through, slide it off. And that was your make one right. Slip the marker. And now for your thumb stitches, working knit one, purl one, knit three, purl one. Go ahead and turn your work. And that was only half of your row. So for row 2B, so this one's a little bit different because we always work our increase on the side of our marker with more stitches. So on our B needle, the beginning has our thumb stitches, so it's shorter. And then we slip the marker and work our increase because it has more stitches here. So for our thumb stitches, work in knit 3, purl 1, knit 2, and then slip the marker. And now we're going to work and make one left. So this is very similar to the make one right that we just did. See this horizontal bar in between your left needle and your right needle? You're going to put it on your left needle. So take your left needle from front to back and pick that up. And now instead of knitting normally, we're going to knit through the back loop. So knitting normally would be like this. We're not going to do that. If you turn your work, you can see the back loop there. You're going to stick your needle into it like this. So now yarn over, pull through, slide off, and that was a make one left. For the rest of our row, we're going to knit one, and then a repeat of a purl one, knit 3, 2 times, and then a purl 1, knit 2. So that was our first full increase row. We increased 1 stitch on each needle, so now each needle should have 19 stitches. Go ahead and turn your work. And from here on out, I will only demonstrate the increase rows, but I will write on screen which rows to work in between them. 4A, so begin with our knit 1, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 3, and then you work that repeat 2 more times. Don't slip your marker yet. We're going to do a make one right. We use the horizontal bar in between our left needle and our right needle. Take your left needle, go behind it, and place it on your needle. And now we're going to knit it as normal. So into the front loop. Should look like that. Yarn over, pull through, slide off. And now you can slip your marker and work a knit 1, purl 1, knit 3, purl 1. Now turn your work. 4B, begin with your knit 3, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, slip your marker, and now we're going to work a make one left. So pick up that horizontal bar right here from front to back onto your left needle. And now we're going to knit into the back loop. So remember that's on this side. So go into the back loop of it. Should look like that. Yarn over, pull through, slide off. Now work a knit 2, and then you repeat purl 1, knit 3, 2 more times, ending with a purl 1 and a knit 2. Turn your work. So as usual, pull out the back needle, and we're going to work a knit 3, purl 1 3 times, as we have been, knit 2, and now we're ready to work a make one right. So remember this horizontal bar in between our left needle and our right needle. Bring your left needle from back to front and pick it up like this. This is how it should be orientated. And now you're going to knit it like normal. So into the front loop, like you would any other stitch. Yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through, slide off. Then slip the marker and work a knit 3, purl 1, knit 2. Turn your work. And for a 7B, for the thumb stitches here, work a knit 1, purl 1, knit 3, purl 1. Slip the marker from left needle to right needle. And now we're going to do a make one left. So the same horizontal bar that's in between your left and your right needle, you're going to put it on your left needle, but this time go from front to back. And now we're going to knit it through the back loop. So this side back here, just like that. Yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through, slide off. And then you just work a knit 1, followed by a repeat of a purl 1, knit 3, 3 times, or until you have 1 stitch left, which you will purl. At the end, go ahead and turn your work. For row 11A, work our knit 3, purl 1, repeat 3 times. After your repeats, you should have 3 stitches left here. Go ahead and knit them. And now work a make one right. So again, the top horizontal bar in between your needles, from back to front, put it on your left needle. It should look like this. And then just go into the front loop of it and knit it as normal. Slip your marker, knit 3, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 2, and then you can turn your work. For 11B, knit 1, purl 1, knit 3, purl 1 for our thumb stitches. Slip the marker. So this time we go into this horizontal bar that's at the top from front to back and pick it up with our left hand needle. And now we go into the back loop of it. So this would be the front loop and this would be the back loop. So our left needle should be in front of our right. Yarn over, pull a loop through, slide off. Now work a knit 2, then work our repeat of a purl 1, knit 3, 3 times. That should leave you with 1 stitch, which you will purl, and that'll be it for the row. You should have 22 stitches on each needle. Turn your work. Now the only removable stitch marker that I had was this black light bulb one. It's the only one I have, and it's just dark on dark fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a scrap of a light colored piece of yarn that I have, and I'm just going to thread it through a yarn needle and just weave it through a couple of these front stitches like this. So now I can more clearly see that this is the beginning of my row A. Totally optional. So for row 15A, so you know the drill, knit 3, yarn to the front, purl 1, do that 3 more times. And then when you get to the marker, don't slip it yet. Instead, take that horizontal bar with your left needle from back to front, and then you're just going to go into the front loop of it like a normal stitch, yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through and slide off. Slip the marker, then for your thumb stitches, knit 3, purl 1, and then knit 2. Then you can turn your work. So for our thumb stitches, knit 1, purl 1, knit 3, purl 1, slip the marker. That horizontal bar in between our needles, we take it with our left needle front to back and pick it up. And remember, we go into the back loop. So our left needle is in front of our right, yarn over, pull through, slide off. Now work a repeat of a knit 3, purl 1, as we've done many times, and you repeat that 4 times total. Go ahead and turn your work. So for row 19, grab a piece of scrap yarn, doesn't have to be super long, and a yarn needle. We're right here. Okay, so we're going to continue knitting our mitten hand right here, and the thumb stitches need to be put on hold so that we can knit them later. Okay, so we're on like right about here. We need to divide these so that we can knit them separately. So to do this, we're going to work until we get to the marker. We're going to put these on waste yarn, and then on the other side we're going to put these on waste yarn because these are also our thumb stitches, and then work across the rest of our needle. We're going to knit 3, purl 1 4 times, and then knit 1. So nothing too difficult here. Knit the first 3 stitches, purl 1, and do that 3 more times. And then you should have 1 more stitch before your marker. Go ahead and knit it. And now we can kind of shimmy these up on our needle, take the marker off, thread your waste yarn or your piece of scrap yarn onto your yarn needle. And now we're going to go into each of these 6 stitches with our yarn needle. Okay, so we're going to transfer them from our needle to our waste yarn. To do this, you go into each stitch, into the front loop of it, from right to left as if you were going to purl. So just transfer it to your yarn needle, and you can start to pull your yarn through. Don't pull it all the way through because we want it to stay on there. So I can actually move all these to my yarn needle and then pull that yarn through. So we can let go of our yarn needle for a second, turn our work, push these stitches up onto our front needle now, as we normally do. And now these are our thumb stitches on this needle. So with the same yarn needle attached, do the same thing we just did. Into the front loop of them from right to left, and just thread that yarn through. Okay, and now I can pull my yarn needle off. I can take my stitch marker off too. So what I like to do as I kind of even out my tails. Okay, so just pull on them to even them out, and then I just tie a slip knot. So these are secure, they're not going to go anywhere. And then I just push the remainder of the yarn towards the inside of the mitten, just so it doesn't get in my way. So do you see how this is starting to look like this? We actually need to flip our work back over so that our front side is showing, and we're going to cast on 2 stitches. So I just kind of pull this back needle out because it's in my way. Now this is going to use the backwards loop method. So with my yarn in my left hand, I stick my thumb underneath it like this. Okay, so holding it, my thumb from back to front like this. I'm going to pick up this front piece of yarn with my needle, just like this. And now I can release my thumb and pull on the yarn. And I've just cast on 1 stitch. So I want to pull it to about the tension of the rest of the stitches, and then we do that again. So grab our yarn, thumb from back to front, pick up the closest piece of yarn on our needle, and release our thumb. You can do a different method if you prefer. This is just by far the easiest in my opinion. So now we can turn our work. This is side B, or needle B. So you should have 19 stitches on needle A and 17 stitches on needle B. And now we're going to work a purl 1, knit 3, repeat 4 times, which should leave you with 1 stitch at the end, which you will purl. So bring your yarn in between your needles to the front, go into the next stitch from right to left, yarn over, pull through, slide off. Yarn in between your needles to the back. Now you want to pull on this a little bit, but not super tight, okay? We can close up any gap we get there later. Now work a knit 3. And that's your repeat. So purl 1, knit 3, 3 more times. And then for your final stitch, you just purl it. Go ahead and turn your work. There should be quite a bit of yarn here in between, but we'll close that later. So for row 20, so you want to slide your stitches up on your needle. The last 2 might be a little bit hard, so you might have to wiggle them around a little bit. So this is all pretty standard. Knit 1, purl 1, and then our knit 3, purl 1, repeat, which you do 4 times. And do that until you have 1 stitch left, which you will knit. We have 2 stitches here that look kind of weird, right? They're very stretched out. Those are our cast on stitches. So we want to purl the first one of those. So it can be kind of hard to get your needle to fit. Just find the front loop of it. Just kind of wiggle it on. Then yarn over front to back, pull a loop through, and slide off. Bring your yarn around to the back, and for your last stitch, we're just going to knit it. So go into the front loop of it, yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through, and slide off, okay? And you'll have a big string here. This will kind of even out a little bit more as we finish up our mitten, and any gap that this creates in our mitten we will close up later. Go ahead and turn your work. And for 20B, work a knit 2 followed by a repeat of a purl 1, knit 3 4 times, ending with a knit 2. So that's all pretty standard. Go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here at the end of 20B. So at the end of 20B, before we turn our work, go ahead and slide your stitches down by pulling on your closer needle. Slide your stitches down to the bend in your needles, and you're going to move 1 stitch from needle A to needle B. Needle B is facing us right here. So what we do is we push them down towards the end, and then we just take 1 stitch, we slide it over and make sure we only get the 1 stitch, so separate them. All right, and then pull on that loop. To even out our stitches, and now you should have 18 stitches on each needle. And that will have closed our gap here, and it will look a lot neater than it did a minute ago. So go ahead and turn your work. And now you're ready to work plain. So we have 2 plain rows, and you're going to work these plain rows until you are 1 1/4 inches or about 3 centimeters away from your desired length. So I have on screen some standardized lengths, but everyone's hand is different. For example, mine are very long, we're up to this point and we're going to work until the decreases. So you're working this section right here. And I'm going to suggest adding a couple extra rows if you're not sure. It will get very narrow at the top, so it's just safer to add a couple rows if you're not sure. So these plain rows are incredibly similar to what we've done in the past, so I'm not going to walk you through them. Just go ahead and work those plain rows until you are 1¼ inches or 3 centimeters away from your desired lengths. So now that we've knit all of the top portion of our hand that we want, it's time to start decreasing and close the top. There are 8 decrease rows in this part. Decrease row 1A, knit the first stitch, yarn to the front, purl the next stitch, yarn to the back, knit the next stitch, and now we're going to work our first decrease. So we're going to knit 2 together. So if you've never worked this, I have a more in-depth video, but basically you go into the next 2 stitches into the front loops of them as if to knit them. So the same way that you would go into one, you go into the front loops of both, okay? Should look like that. Yarn over, pull a loop through both of them, and slide them both off your left-hand needle. And that was your first decrease. Now bring your yarn in between your needles to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 3, and now we're going to knit 2 together again. So again, go into the front loops of both of those stitches the same way that you would if you were knitting them individually. Yarn over, pull through, slide off. Now knit the next 2 stitches, yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 1, and now we're going to work another knit 2 together. So into the front loops of both of those stitches, yarn over, pull through both, slide both off, yarn to the front and purl the last stitch. Go ahead and turn your work. For row 1B, we're going to knit the first 3 stitches, and then you work a knit 2 together. So into the front loops of both of the next 2 stitches, yarn over, pull through, slide off, then knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 1, and then knit the next 2 stitches together. Yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back, knit 3, knit 2 together, and then knit the final stitch. Turn your work. You should have 15 stitches left on each needle after row 1. So knit the first stitch, yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 2 together, so into the front loops of both. Crisscross your needles with the right needle underneath the left, yarn over, pull through, slide off. Yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 2, just normally. And now we knit 2 together. And then we knit 2 normally. Yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 2 together, and end with a purl stitch. Go ahead and turn your work. Go ahead and knit the next 2 stitches, and then I knit 2 together, and then I knit 2 normally again, and then I yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 2 together, yarn to the front and purl 1, knit the next 2 stitches normally, and then I knit 2 together, and I end with a plain knit stitch. Go ahead and turn your work. You should have 12 stitches on each needle after that. Alright, for row 5, knit the first stitch, knit the next 2 stitches together, so into the front loops of both of them, yarn over, pull through, slide off, yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 1, and then knit the next 2 stitches together, and then knit 2, knit 2 together again, yarn to the front and purl one. Go ahead and turn your work. For row 5B, knit the first stitch, knit the next 2 stitches together, knit 2, knit 2 together, yarn to the front and purl one, yarn to the back and knit 1, working knit 2 together, and end with a plain knit 1. Turn your work. For row 7A, knit the first 2 stitches together. So go under the front loops of the first 2 stitches as if to knit, yarn over from front to back, pull a loop through, bring your yarn to the front and purl 1, bring your yarn to the back and knit the next 2 stitches together again, knit the next stitch, knit 2 together, yarn to the front and purl that last stitch. Go ahead and turn your work. For row 7B, knit the first 2 stitches together, knit the next stitch normally, knit 2 together, yarn to the front and purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 2 together again, and knit the last stitch. You should only have 6 stitches on each needle now. And for row 8, our final row, you're going to knit the first stitch, knit 2 together, knit 2 together again, knit 1, turn your work, knit the first stitch, knit the next 2 stitches together, knit the next 2 stitches together again, and purl the final stitch. Go ahead and turn your work. You should only have 4 stitches on each needle at this point. Grab a yarn needle and then cut your yarn, leaving a tail. It doesn't have to be super long. I cut maybe 10 to 12 inches. Thread your tail through a yarn needle. So what we're going to do with needle A facing us, we're going to do pretty much the same thing we did with our thumb stitches, right? We're going to take our yarn needle and go into the first stitch here. So go into the front loop of it from right to left, slip it off, pull the yarn through, and you just do that all the way across. Let go of our one needle and pull so that our point is closer to our tail here. So we can go ahead and turn our work. And we just do the same thing with these stitches. Into the front loop from right to left. Pull the yarn through. And we're almost done. Okay, so pull tight on it. And now what we're going to do is you might want to hold your hand on the inside here. You're going to take your yarn needle and go through the hole to the wrong side of your work. And I grab it with my other hand and pull it through. Now I turn my work inside out. I pull it tight just to make sure it's fully secure. So I've got the stitches here that close my hole. I'm just going to go around in a circle and just pick up any stitches that I really want. So I'm first going to grab a couple of stitches here. There's no exact science to this, so I'm just going to grab a couple stitches just so I'm secure on this side. And then I'm going to go through some of those stitches that were my final ones. So they are around the closed portion of my mitten. I'm just going to go kind of counterclockwise, but you could go either way, around in a circle a little bit, pulling tight after each time. And I can hook in an extra stitch here around the outside. I just want to go around once or twice in a circle and grab 1 or 2 pieces that are not one of our final stitches. Again, there's no exact science, just go around kind of in a circle until you feel like you've securely closed the top of your mitten. Then I can cut my tail, turn my mitten right side out, and the top is closed. Should look like this at the top. So now it's time to knit the thumb with our side A showing, the one that has our stitch marker in it, or just the side that is orientated like this with the thumb on the left. So we see that there's a thumb opening here. The side closest to us, we're going to pick up 6 stitches with our needle. If you need to, you can pull up on the waste yarn and it should kind of plump them up a little bit, make them a little bit easier to see. But here's my first one. So I just go into the front loop of it from right to left as if I was purling and pick it up. And I just do that for all of these. So there's 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now I pull my needle. So I pull them onto my cord, turn my work, and the final 6 stitches here I pick up on my needle. So just keep going around, going into the front loops of them from right to left. There's 3, there's 4, 5, and 6. Again, if they've kind of fallen through, just pull on the waste yarn and it should pull them back up. So now I can turn my work again and I can cut my waste yarn and pull it out because I have all my stitches. So I can slide these first 6 up to my first needle and pull out the second needle, and we're ready to work magic loop. So first we have to pick up 2 stitches. We have 2 cast on stitches here. Okay, we have a purl one, you can see all these purl bumps, and we have a knit one. So a column of knit stitches and a column of alternating purl bumps. Those are our 2 cast on stitches that when we separated for the thumb and the hand, we cast on 2. So what we need to do is pick up 1 cast on stitch and 1 stitch from this gap in between. So what I do is I take my pinky on my right hand and I hold a piece of yarn onto it and I wrap it. I wrap it just to keep tension. I hold the yarn in my left hand, but if you hold your yarn in the right hand, the same concept can apply. Somewhere at the bottom of this column right here of alternating purl bumps, you're going to pick up 2 loops. Stick your needle underneath 2 bumps, okay? They might be a little tight, but you should be able to kind of wiggle them onto your needle. So now I'm going to take my working yarn and wrap it from front to back around that needle. Okay, this is my right needle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these 2 picked up loops over this yarn over and off. Okay, so I slide them down to the tip of my needle and I pull them over and off. Okay, so I have 1 stitch now. If you find it easier, you can stick a crochet hook underneath that stitch, yarn over and pull a loop through. So I'm going to still hold on to my tension yarn just until I get my first row knit. So I have the 1 picked up stitch on my right and the 6 stitches on my left. Now there's quite a big gap here, right? So I want to pick up a stitch somewhere along here. Is the same process I just did. I'm going to stick my needle either under 1 loop or 2, and it doesn't really have to be an exact science. So I just kind of do what feels right. So I'm going to pick up this loop and go through this hole. So I'm going to yarn over, and then I'm going to pull those 2 loops over that yarn over and off. So slide down to the edge, and I kind of do it one at a time. So I've slid 1 over and off, and then I slide the other one over and off. So now I should have 2 stitches on my right needle and 6 on my left. Now if you're using a crochet hook, you would just go into a hole or an area in between, and you would yarn over from front to back, and you would pull that yarn over through the hole. And then you would just, without twisting, place this on your right hand needle. We can tighten up those stitches later if they feel a little bit loose. The rest of row 1A, so knit the next 3 stitches. Yarn to the front, purl 1, yarn to the back and knit 2. Turn your work. And now for row 1B, we're going to knit the first stitch, yarn to the front, purl the next stitch, then knit 3, and then bring the yarn to the front and purl 1. So now we can kind of let our second needle rest. We're going to do basically what we have already done, where we pick up 2 stitches, 1 in between our cast on stitches and our current stitches. So there's this big gap here. We want to pick up 1 somewhere in there, and then we have this column of knit stitches here. Next to the first stitch that we picked up on our other needle, we have this column of knit stitches. we're going to pick up a stitch from there. Just pick one somewhere along this gap. So I'm going to pick up this one and this one. Okay, I'm just trying to create a way that it will not be super noticeable, but we can always close it later. Since I showed it to you with a knitting needle last time, I'll show it to you with a crochet hook. So yarn over from front to back, pull through all those loops, and this is your cast on stitch. You just place it on your needle without twisting it and remove the crochet hook. If we look at our gap, we can clearly see this column of knit stitches. We're going to go into the base of that and go underneath 2 loops. Okay, so again, you can do this with a crochet hook or a knitting needle. Yarn over from front to back, and then pull these 2 over this yarn over and off. So slide down, prevent the yarn over from falling off with your finger, pull it over and off. So you should have 8 stitches on each needle. So before we turn our work, this is needle B, this is needle A, the side that has a stitch marker. So needle B is closest to us, and what we're going to do is we're going to join in the round. So slip 1 stitch from needle A onto needle B. So slide your stitches down to the tips, and I just pick it up with my finger, and without twisting it, I just put it on needle B. It'll feel really loose, that's okay. We're going to tighten it up later. We take the second stitch here on needle B and pull it over this first and off. So slide it down to the edge, pick up the second one with your finger, pull it over and off. Now you should have 7 stitches on needle A and 8 on needle B. Turn your work, and you can pull on your working yarn and the tail yarn from the thumb to kind of close that gap up right now if you want a little bit. Now that was the hardest bit. Row 2A, knit the first 2 stitches just normally. Nothing fancy. Yarn to the front and purl 1. Yarn to the back and knit 3. Yarn to the front and purl 1. Turn your work. For 2B, you knit the first 3 stitches. Yarn to the front and purl 1. Yarn to the back and knit 2. And then you knit the last 2 stitches together. So into the front loops of both of them. Yarn over, pull through, slide off. And you can turn your work. And for rows 3 and 4, those are just your plain rows. There's no more decreasing. You just work plain until you are 1/4 inch from your desired thumb length. So go ahead and knit as many repeats of those as you want, and I'll meet you back here for your final decrease row. So go into the front loops of the first 2 stitches as if to knit, yarn over, pull through both, and slide off. Do that a second time and a third time. And now you'll have 1 stitch left on your left hand needle. So you can kind of slide these stitches on your right needle and just pull that left needle all the way, and you've just moved that stitch to the other side. So turn your work. You should have 8 stitches on this needle now. And for final row B, we're just going to knit 2 together 4 times. So go into the front loop of the first 2 stitches at the same time, yarn over, pull through, slide off, and do that until you have no more stitches on your left hand needle. And there you have it. You've only got 4 left on this needle and 3 on the other. So go ahead and turn your work and cut a tail. Doesn't have to be super long. I cut mine about 10 inches. So this is the exact same process that we did at the top of the mitten. So thread through a yarn needle, and now you're going to thread the yarn through each of these stitches from right to left as if to purl. So go into the front loop from right to left. Same process as purling. And then pull the yarn through. And now we pull this needle so the point of our needle is close to our working yarn, and do the same thing with the last 4 stitches. Into the front loop from right to left, and then pull that yarn through. We are done with our needles. Go ahead and pull on the tail yarn to close it. Go through the top of this hole with my needle towards the wrong side, pull it through, and then I can turn my thumb inside out, and I'm just going to go around that hole a couple of times. First, I want to secure it in really any stitch nearby. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. I just don't want to undo anything I just did. So now I can go around a couple of those stitches, and I've caught, a couple of loops around as well. I'm just kind of going around in a circle. It does not have to be perfect. And then I just kind of pick up any loop around that I feel like it and go around one more time. There's no exact science to this. The only thing we're trying to do is secure our tail and keep that top closed. So I'm going to go through a couple loops for our final bit and then cut that tail yarn close to the top of our thumb. So now I can actually turn the whole thing inside out. You might have a little bit of a hole here. So this is the piece of tail that we use to begin knitting our thumb. So I just kind of want to pull on it to close up any loose loops that I have, and then I thread it through a yarn needle. So again, there's no exact science to this. There's no one perfect way to do this. So here's a hole right here, right? So I'm going to bring my yarn through a couple loops down and go up along the other parallel side, through a couple of loops on the other side of that hole. Okay, so here's my hole. I went down, now I'm going up. And if I pull on it, that actually closed it. So if you have another hole, you can do that too. This is more of just like a looser stitch and not a hole. So I have one down here that I'd like to close. So I just kind of thread through a few stitches to get close to it, right? Pull my yarn through, and I just kind of do the same thing. I just go up through a couple stitches on one side of the hole, and then down through on the other side of the hole. Okay, if I pull on it, that kind of closed it. So then I just weave my yarn underneath a couple stitches here. So I just go up a couple and down a couple, and to me that's fully secure. I don't think that strand is going anywhere, so I cut it, and that's it. I closed up any kind of gap that I have here. You can do that as many times or as few times as you want. Now if you're really worried about what it's going to look like on the right side, you can thread through and then check it, because sometimes it's a little bit noticeable when I do that, and sometimes it's not. So if it matters to you, every time you thread through, just turn it over and see if you like the way it looks on the right side of the work. So here's what this looks like for me. Every time I close that gap, it's a little bit different, but now I can cut my marker tail, pull it out, remove any markers. So just thread that tail through a yarn needle. So here's where it is. I'm going to thread it through this hole right here. So I do not want to go into the hole it's coming from, right? Because I don't want to undo my cast on. So instead I'm going to go through this hole right here towards the wrong side, and now I can kind of flip it so the wrong side is facing me. There's no one right way to weave in ends. The only thing that you don't want to do is just go straight up or straight horizontal, because those are easier to unravel. So you want to do a combination of both, okay? Go a little bit diagonal. I'm going to go wrap around this leg of that knit stitch, okay? And I'm only doing this because I want to get a little bit away from the edge, so that when I weave it in, it's not so noticeable. So I know I said don't do straight vertical, but this doesn't count because we're going to weave it in better at the top. So I do that just to kind of mimic. So you can see on this side it's not noticeable. Okay, so now I'm just going to hide it in my stitch pattern. So you see how I have a stitch here. So go underneath this loop. I'm just mimicking a stitch. And then there's a loop here that's kind of like an upside down U. I'm going to go and follow that exact path. So to create a U. And now back through that first stitch. Now I'm going to go over here. You don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. And now I'm just going to go up through here, split a couple stitches up here, pull through, and now I'm going to cut it. So we wove it all the way up, got it twisted up in a stitch here, around here, and diagonal. Okay, so that is plenty secure in my mind. It's not noticeable on the right side of the work, so that's my main goal. And there you have it. That is your finished mitten. So to make a second mitten, you do exactly what you did. They're reversible. So this could be my left mitten, or I could flip it and it could be my right mitten. So go ahead and repeat those steps again to make yourself a second mitten. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed knitting this mitten with me. Stay tuned because I will have a men's mitten pattern coming soon.